Brisbane property set to stall. Let's have a look. Hello everyone, Florian.Heise here and welcome to another episode of HeiseSays. I had my stein of coffee and I thought we'd have a look at this news article from Domain discussing Brisbane property prices. Now apparently here in Brisbane our property, according to these experts, is set to stall and not fall as much as some of the other states. Particularly, well, other states, who are we kidding? Melbourne and Sydney, really. Now, I'll bring up this chart here that I have with regards to property prices, and you can see the growth in Melbourne, which is the blue line, and the growth in Sydney, which is the light blue line. Brisbane is the darker brown line, so we have certainly not grown as much as Sydney or Melbourne since 2006. I know there were still opportunities, because I live in Brisbane, to get decent houses at a reasonable price a few years ago, or to get a fixer-upper like we did, under 400. I mean, there's still opportunities there. It hasn't overheated as much as the southern cities. But then again, Brisbane, it's a little cheaper to live than the southern cities. I think, I prefer the quality of life here, to be honest. I prefer the weather. So a recent drop in Brisbane's new home listings could protect the city from a house price free fall as low interest rates and government stimulus packages curb the rise of forced sales. Well, if that's going to happen here in Brisbane, why won't it happen in Sydney or Melbourne? I think we won't really start to see the impact until 6 months' time. 6 months' time is when we'll see it. When people are simply pushed to the limits, when more jobs start going, when unemployment increases, and when the JobKeeper runs out. If the economy hasn't restarted by then, if the lockdown hasn't stepped back, that could have an impact. New data from Domain's latest house price report released on Thursday revealed property listings nosedived by more than 20% over the past few weeks as hundreds of cautious vendors pulled their homes from the market amid the illness restrictions. The report revealed the number of house price listings plunged 26% this month in comparison to March last year, in what was the most dramatic shift in the city's property sector. But while the stock squeeze has left real estate agents scrambling to secure sales, industry experts say it could offer a glimmer of hope for the market by providing fundamental support for ongoing median house prices. Well, if there aren't that many people aren't forced to sell, I mean, the average price of housing in Brisbane is less than Sydney and Melbourne. If the wages are generally comparable, people may not be as at great a risk. I mean, you'd hate some of the stuff people are paying $1 million for down in Sydney for a little 2-bedroom unit. It just shocks me. Probably because I see how much these things get put up for, but just the cost for some of them here in Brisbane. So, that's also another thing to consider. If people are downgrading from Sydney or Melbourne, they can invest or buy here and get more for their money, perhaps. Or they could, downsize, move up here. Weather's good. Domain senior research analyst Dr. Nicola Powell said while hard economic times lay ahead, game-changing measures such as the 6-month mortgage freeze would keep many desperate homeowners from selling. So this is what they're pinning all their hopes on. And this isn't really a freeze. It's, well, I guess in some ways it is a freeze, but you're still getting interest and it's all tacked onto the end of your mortgage, isn't it? But then again, I mean, just pay more later if you want to. You don't need to be in debt. It depends on your mortgage, but if you're variable, just pay it off quicker. When you get high levels of forced sales, that's when you see prices falling. So while it's going to take time for the economy to come back, we have huge amounts of stimulus in place. Okay, now the stimulus, everyone has to realize, that is really, this feels like, I'm quite worried that they will do everything they can to prop up the property market here in Australia. I saw some quotes from Scott Morrison, our Prime Minister, recently where he didn't seem to understand why you would want to address negative gearing. Now, I appreciate the argument to limit tax provided to the government and as a method of adding value. But, I mean, can you do the same thing with losses in the stock market or investing? My understanding is that's dependent on how much money you make, what type of trading you do, and that the loss can only be associated to a capital gains. What if negative gearing? What if the losses incurred in maintaining a property? What if you couldn't put it against income? What if you could just put it against the capital gain for the property and just add that up over time? So no one has to pay any capital gains tax. Wouldn't that be great? Would that affect the market? The problem is, it just encourages people to put all their resources into property. And then we get to the point now where 52% of our wealth, of our civilization is in property. And you just need to keep feeding it. You keep feeding it. Too many people have a vested interest in it. And it's a tough situation to get out of because so many people are depending on that for their retirement or it's their livelihood. So how can we decant out of it? That's the question. Any drastic, sharp cut, it's going to be unfair to future generations that want to take advantage of it, even if they can get into the property market at all. But it's also going to lose any politicians their election. We saw that with Shorty. So I'd like to hear suggestions from people how it could be done. How you could gently wean our civilization off this obsession with property to allow the economy to grow in different sectors. Anyway, let's have a look here. So we can see here March 20, average house is 690 here in Brisbane. March 19, it was 670. So year on year, we're up 3%, we're down 1.4. Ipswich, average is 430. So it's up 4.9. Lockyer Valley, 375, up 300. Logan, 452, up 0.6. Moreton Bay, 490. I mean, you can see here, Somerset, 370. I mean, you can see here, guys, there's some reasonable prices. You can still get places where average median house prices is under 400 grand. And a mortgage under 400 grand, I think you'd have to be in a lot of trouble to be able to no longer afford that. Particularly with these interest rates. Other things would have to have gone wrong. The quarterly, it'd be a lot easier for you to make drastic cuts and changes to your life. I mean, you could, maybe not now, maybe with Ubering, yeah, you probably could. Working on the weekend, if people start going out again, you could pull in enough to pay a mortgage for $375 on a couple of nights. You could do it. Wouldn't be fun, but you could do it. The quarterly figures were more subdued, with Greater Brisbane up by only 0.6%, and Brisbane LGA actually down 1.4%, the local government authority. The quarterly Domain House Price Report revealed the Sunshine State capital had been tracking well. Annually, house prices were up in Greater Brisbane by 2.1% and by 3% in the Brisbane local government area. Unit prices took a 4.6% hit from 392,000 in March last year to 374,000 in March this year, making it the steepest annual price fall in 2 decades. Well, I'm not surprised. The number of units that are going up all around the place here in Brisbane is just nuts. I've got mates who invested into a development and it's, was meant to all flip real quick, and it's been years now. They still haven't sold all of them. Dr. Powell said, while a slight increase in unit demand wasn't enough to curb long-running supply and demand discrepancies, the fact house prices across the city had enjoyed a much more stable rate of growth over the past year, reaching a record median height of 700,000 in December 2019 before dropping slightly to 670 last month, was encouraging. Transactions will slow in weeks and months ahead, but once we're out of this, there will be light at the end of the tunnel, he said. But across southeast Queensland, the tourism areas will be hardest hit. With the borders closed and no tourism industry, it may end up impacting the sales market. I think it's landlords who could be a burden on the market there if they can't weather the storm and get that cash flow. Well, he's got a point there. Queensland is a tourism state, guys. It's the Sunshine State. And tourism has taken a big hit in this country. If we bring up this chart here, we can see just the proportion of tourism in our whole economy. It's 60 billion. 3.1% of GDP. I mean, they're talking about property prices in Brisbane. It'll be interesting to see what happens up in Cairns, what happens up in Townsville. When here's the thing, even if you take a hit here in Brisbane, you could. A viewer was saying he sold up, and then they moved further out. No mortgage, got something cheaper. Once you free yourself from that debt slavery, I can imagine. I'm working bloody hard towards it myself. Just the level of stress you have, I think, would make a big difference in your life. Big difference. And I know you still got to pay your rates and all these other things, but guys, it's nothing. Nothing compared to a mortgage, okay? If you can't afford rates, then you're in a bit of trouble, honestly. So, Alexander Jones of McGrath Paddington said his agency had certainly noticed the contraction in stock volume, but said the silver lining was the fundamental support for prices it fostered. So supply and demand, less people selling, less people needing to sell. We're not seeing forced sales, and that's thanks to lower interest rates and government support. That's helped the market, he said. We're not getting as much traction now, but quality properties are still getting good inquiry. And having said all that, my team did over 13 million in sales for the month of March. April we expect will be quieter, but I'm starting to see more opportunism. There are still a lot of lifestyle buyers, and those who are upgrading are benefiting in this market. Ray White, Paddington agent Judy O'D, said despite the stock squeeze, Brisbane's inner city rim was continuing to perform thanks to buyers' demand for family-friendly homes. Also, the inland situation hasn't been as dire here as Sydney, so it makes sense that our market senses it's still okay, she said. I've been doing this for 15 years, so I've been through the ups and downs. While this is the hardest one I've lived through, markets do spring back, and they will spring back. It will be different, but people will still buy and sell. Well, we'll have to see, guys. What do you think? Do you think Brisbane? Do you think Hobart? Do you think Lonnie, Adelaide? Do you think they'll be hit as hard as Sydney? Or Melbourne? Or maybe they're being overly optimistic. I'm just thinking of Perth, of the number of people that are in negative equity over there, and some of the properties that were selling quite high. Because, I mean, you got some lower averages here under, Lockyer Valley, Somerset down to 370. But you're paying over 600, 700, some people 800 for an inner city Queenslander in one of the posh suburbs. They could take a decent hint off them. These houses are, pretty old, need a bit of work, some of them. Some of them look beautiful, but you got to maintain them. I know, we're reglazing. My sister-in-law has now become the official glass puttier of the house, so it's fantastic. But what do you reckon, guys? Do you think it'll take a hit? We'll have to see. Maybe, if everything takes a 30% hit, start seeing twos in front of some of these lower-end properties, under 300 grand. As always, please let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comments below. Thank you all for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. If you're a fan and you want to support us, there are a few ways you can. You can join the channel on YouTube or on Patreon. You can use our affiliate links at Amazon or eBay, or Independent Reserve and Kucoin for the crypto traders we have. You can send us gold using Gold Pass, support us by buying merch from the HeiseSays blog, pocket squares that Rachel made right behind me, or you can support us from PayPal. Thanks everyone, have a great weekend, and I'll see you all tomorrow.